stared at my phone screen, reading the text message for the fourth time, hoping the words would somehow change. They didn't. Don't come to Christmas this year. Sarah's in-laws are coming. They're corporate executives from Davidson Industries. We need to make a good impression for her marriage. You know how you are with successful people. Maybe next year. My father's words hit like a physical blow to my chest. My own family was choosing my sister's wealthy in-laws over me for Christmas dinner. I sat in my luxury downtown office surrounded by business awards and accolades. They knew nothing about feeling more alone than ever. The irony of my father's message burned through me as I leaned back in my leather executive chair, gazing out at the Seattle skyline from the 32nd floor. If only they knew who I really was. If only they understood what I'd built while they thought I was still struggling to make ends meet. 5 years ago, I was exactly what my family believed I still was. A failure. I'd been laid off from my marketing position at a mid-sized firm, spending months sending out resumes that disappeared into digital black holes. My unemployment benefits ran out. Credit card debt mounted. I moved back into my childhood bedroom at 27 years old, listening to my father's sighs of disappointment every morning over coffee. When are you going to get serious about your life? Lionel, he'd ask, shaking his head while reading the business section. Look at these young entrepreneurs. They're making millions while you can't even land an entry-level position. Sarah would chime in with her psychology degree wisdom. Maybe you're just not meant for the corporate world, Lionel. Have you considered retail or maybe food service? Not everyone can be successful in business. Those words echoed in my mind as I built Sterling Solutions from absolutely nothing. I started in that childhood bedroom using my last $300 to register the company and build a basic website. My first client was a local restaurant that needed help organizing their inventory system. I charged them $50 and spent 18 hours creating a solution that saved them thousands annually. Word spread slowly through Seattle's small business community. A boutique needed customer database management. A construction company required project tracking software. A dental practice wanted automated appointment scheduling. Each project taught me something new. Each satisfied client led to 3 more referrals. My family watched me leave the house each day in my beat-up Honda Civic, wearing the same 3 button-down shirts I'd owned since college. They assumed I was doing odd jobs, maybe some freelance work that barely kept me afloat. I never corrected them, pride maybe. Or perhaps I wanted to see how they'd treat me when they thought I had nothing. By year 2, Sterling Solutions had landed its first major contract, a mid-sized manufacturing company that needed complete digital transformation. The project was worth $200,000. I hired my first employee, a brilliant programmer named Jennifer, who worked out of her apartment. We delivered the system 3 weeks ahead of schedule under budget, and the client's efficiency increased by 37%. The referrals from that success opened doors to bigger opportunities. Tech startups needed scalable solutions. Established corporations required modernization of legacy systems. Healthcare networks demanded HIPAA-compliant databases. Each project grew larger, more complex, more profitable. During family dinners, I'd listen to my father praise other people's children. The Johnson boy just got promoted to regional manager. The Williams girl started her own accounting firm. He'd glance at me picking at my food. Everyone your age seems to have their life figured out. I wanted to tell them about the Fortune 500 companies calling my office, about the team of 37 brilliant minds I'd assembled, about the downtown high-rise building I'd purchased to house our expanding operations, about the $12 million in annual revenue that made me one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs under 35. But something held me back. Maybe I needed to know they'd love me regardless of my bank account. Maybe I wanted their acceptance to be unconditional, not based on my net worth. Or maybe deep down I feared they'd change completely if they knew the truth. Become different people around me? Treat me like a business opportunity rather than family? So I maintained the facade. I drove the old Civic to family gatherings, while my Tesla stayed hidden in my private garage. I wore simple clothes while my custom suits hung in my penthouse closet. I nodded along when they discussed my potential, while contracts worth millions sat on my desk waiting for my signature. The deception became easier over time. When I bought my parents a new refrigerator for Christmas 2 years ago, I told them I'd saved up from side projects. When I paid for Sarah's wedding flowers without being asked, I claimed I'd gotten lucky with a big client. They accepted these explanations without question, reinforcing their belief that I was barely scraping by. Meanwhile, Sterling Solutions grew into something extraordinary. We developed proprietary software that revolutionized inventory management for retail chains. Our customer relationship management system became the gold standard for mid-sized companies. Fortune magazine called our innovations game-changing in a 6-page feature article. That magazine cover sat framed on my office wall now, a professional photo of me in a sharp navy suit, the headline reading, "Entrepreneur of the Year, How Lionel Sterling Built an Empire While Everyone Counted Him Out." The article detailed my journey from unemployment to multimillionaire, praising my visionary leadership and revolutionary approach to business solutions. My family had no idea that magazine existed. They didn't know about the industry awards lining my office walls. They'd never seen the penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. They couldn't imagine the respect I commanded in boardrooms across the country. And now they were rejecting me for Christmas dinner because they were embarrassed of their unsuccessful son in front of important business people. The man they were trying to impress, Richard Davidson, had been calling my office for 3 months, desperate to schedule a meeting. His company was hemorrhaging money, and Sterling Solutions represented his last hope for salvation. Richard Davidson had no idea that the young CEO he needed to save his empire was the same person his new family considered too embarrassing for Christmas dinner. The irony was so perfect, so painfully beautiful, that I almost laughed out loud. Almost. Instead, I felt my heart break a little more as another family group text popped up on my phone. Sarah sharing photos of expensive wine she'd bought to impress her in-laws. My mother describing the hand-polished silver she'd arranged on the dining room table. My father discussing conversation topics that would showcase the family's sophistication. They were trying so hard to appear worthy of respect from people who desperately needed what I could offer them. The very family they were trying to impress was about to come begging for my help, not knowing I was the son they'd just cast aside. As I sat in my corner office watching the Seattle rain streak down my windows, I realized something important was about to happen. Something that would change everything between my family and me forever. I picked up my phone and typed a simple response to my father's devastating message. Okay. But I had no intention of spending Christmas alone. Madison Chen knocked on my office door Tuesday morning, carrying a stack of message slips that seemed to grow thicker each day. My assistant had worked with me for 2 years, ever since Sterling Solutions moved into the downtown high-rise. She was efficient, discreet, and had an uncanny ability to read the importance of business communications. "Mr. Sterling Davidson Industries called again," she announced, setting the messages on my mahogany desk. "That's the 7th call this week. Mr. Davidson sounds increasingly desperate each time." I shuffled through the pink message slips, noting the progression from professional urgency to barely concealed panic. Monday's message read, "Richard Davidson requests meeting to discuss potential partnership opportunities." Tuesday's became more specific. "Mr. Davidson emphasizes time-sensitive nature of partnership discussion." By Friday, the language had shifted dramatically. Mr. Davidson states this is a critical business emergency, requiring immediate attention. "What did you tell him this time?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. Madison consulted her notes. "I followed your instructions, told him you're reviewing several partnership opportunities, and will respond when your schedule permits." He asked if there was anything he could do to expedite the process. I said you'd get back to him. I nodded, though my stomach churned with conflicting emotions. Through my private investigator contacts, a resource that proved invaluable in the corporate world, I'd obtained detailed intelligence about Davidson Industries' financial situation. The picture was uglier than I'd initially suspected. Richard Davidson's company was 3 months away from total collapse. What had once been a thriving industrial supply business was now drowning in debt, outdated technology, and catastrophic management decisions. Over the past 18 months, Davidson had laid off 230 employees. His stock price had plummeted 83%. Creditors were circling like vultures, and several major clients had already jumped ship to competitors. The most damaging revelation was that Davidson had personally guaranteed many of the company's loans. If Davidson Industries went under, Richard would lose everything: his house, his retirement savings, his reputation. He'd mortgaged his future on a business that was failing due to his own stubborn refusal to modernize. My phone buzzed with another family group text. This time it was my mother sharing pictures of the formal dining room she'd spent all morning decorating. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Gold-rimmed plates were positioned with mathematical precision. Fresh flowers from the expensive florist downtown created elegant centerpieces. Everything has to be perfect for the Davidson family, she'd written. These are very important people, and we want them to feel welcome in our home. Sarah immediately responded with heart-eye emojis and gushing praise. Mom, this looks incredible. Richard and Marcus are going to be so impressed. Thank you for making such an effort for my husband's family. My father chimed in next. I've selected 3 bottles of wine from the collection I've been saving for special occasions. The 1998 Bordeaux should pair perfectly with the prime rib roast. I want these successful business leaders to see that we appreciate fine things too. Each message felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. They were spending thousands of dollars and countless hours to impress a man who was about to lose everything. Meanwhile, that same man was begging for my help to save his dying company, completely unaware that the solution to his problems came from the family member they just rejected. Madison cleared her throat gently. There's something else, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Davidson specifically requested information about Sterling Solutions leadership. He asked if our CEO is really as young and innovative as industry rumors suggest. This caught my attention. What exactly did he say? He mentioned hearing that you're brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and have turned around several failing companies. He seems particularly interested in your reputation for unconventional solutions to complex problems. I almost laughed at the irony. Richard Davidson was seeking help from someone he'd never met but whose reputation preceded him. Not knowing that same person was considered too embarrassing to share Christmas dinner with his family. My private phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. Hey, Lionel. My sister's voice carried forced cheerfulness. I wanted to call and apologize about Christmas. I know Dad's text was kind of harsh, but you have to understand the situation. I understand perfectly, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. It's not that we don't want you there, she continued, though her words suggested otherwise. It's just that Richard and Marcus are very sophisticated business people. They're used to a certain level of conversation. You know, topics about corporate strategy, market investments, industry trends. I'm worried you might feel out of place. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. My sister, whose greatest professional achievement was managing a small marketing department, was worried I couldn't hold an intelligent conversation with business executives. Plus, Sarah added, Richard has been talking about some major business deal he's working on. Something about partnering with an innovative technology company to transform Davidson Industries. He's very excited about it, says it could revolutionize their entire operation. My grip tightened on the phone. Richard was discussing his desperate pursuit of Sterling Solutions at family gatherings, not knowing he was talking about my company. He keeps mentioning this company called Sterling Solutions, Sarah continued. Apparently, they're run by some young genius CEO who's transformed multiple struggling businesses. Richard says getting this partnership could be the most important deal of his career. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Richard Davidson was using family dinners to brag about the business deal that might save him. A deal with the brother-in-law he'd never met because his family was too ashamed to introduce them. That sounds very important, I managed to say. It is. That's why Christmas dinner needs to go perfectly. If Richard's business deal works out, it could mean amazing things for Marcus's career, maybe even our whole family's future. We can't risk anything going wrong. After Sarah hung up, I sat staring at my phone for several minutes. My family's future depended on Richard Davidson's partnership with Sterling Solutions. They just didn't know that Sterling Solutions belonged to the family member they'd excluded from Christmas. Madison appeared in my doorway again. Mr. Sterling Davidson Industries called twice more while you were on the phone. Mr. Davidson is requesting an emergency meeting. He says he's willing to travel anywhere, meet at any time, and discuss any terms necessary. I looked at my calendar, noting that December 23rd fell on a Monday, the day before Christmas Eve. My family would be making final preparations for their important dinner, while Richard Davidson was in my office begging for salvation. Madison, please call Mr. Davidson back, I said slowly. Tell him I can meet with him Monday, December 23rd at 10 a.m. in our main conference room. Inform him that this will be a comprehensive partnership discussion, and he should bring any family members involved in Davidson Industries leadership. Should I mention any specific preparation requirements? Madison asked. Yes. Tell him to bring complete financial records, partnership proposals, and anyone with decision-making authority. And Madison, make sure our conference room is set up to showcase all of Sterling Solutions' achievements. I want our industry awards, partnership certificates, and press coverage prominently displayed, including the Fortune magazine cover. I smiled for the first time since receiving my father's text. Especially the Fortune magazine cover. As Madison left to make the arrangements, I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could find about the Davidson family dynamics. Marcus Davidson was Richard's youngest son, married to Sarah for 2 years. He worked in middle management at Davidson Industries largely due to family connections rather than exceptional ability. According to my sources, Marcus was well-meaning but lacked the strategic thinking necessary to save the failing company. Richard Davidson himself was 62 years old, a second-generation business owner who'd inherited a thriving company and slowly run it into the ground through poor decisions and stubborn resistance to change. He was described as proud, traditional, and somewhat elitist in his social attitudes. Perfect. My phone buzzed with another family group text. This time it was a photo from my father showing the expensive prime rib roast he'd special ordered from the finest butcher in town. The caption read, "Only the best for our distinguished guests." This cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month, but the Davidson family deserves our finest effort. I closed my phone and turned to stare out my office window at the bustling Seattle streets below. Somewhere in this city, my family was preparing to worship a man who was about to discover that his salvation lay in the hands of the son they'd rejected. Monday couldn't come fast enough. The weekend passed in a blur of strategic planning and emotional preparation. While my family bustled around preparing for their important Christmas guests, I orchestrated what would become the most significant business meeting of my career, not for the money involved, but for the personal vindication it would provide. Saturday morning, I arrived at Sterling Solutions early to personally oversee the conference room setup. Our main meeting space occupied the entire north side of the 32nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains. On a clear day like this, the setting was nothing short of spectacular. I directed our facilities team to arrange the room for maximum impact. My Fortune magazine cover, Entrepreneur of the Year, How Lionel Sterling Built an Empire While Everyone Counted Him Out, was positioned prominently on the main wall where visitors would see it immediately upon entering. Surrounding it, I had them display every major award Sterling Solutions had received the Pacific Northwest Business Excellence Award, the Innovation in Technology Prize, the Young Entrepreneur Recognition from the Seattle Chamber of Commerce. Along the conference table, I placed leather portfolios containing documentation of our most impressive partnerships: Boeing, Microsoft, Starbucks, Amazon, companies that trusted Sterling Solutions with their most critical technology needs. Any business executive would recognize these names instantly and understand the level of respect they represented. My assistant team prepared detailed financial reports showing Sterling Solutions' growth trajectory: $12 million in annual revenue, 37 employees across 4 departments, offices in Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco, client retention rate of 94%, industry-leading profit margins, numbers that would make any struggling businessman weep with envy. While I worked, my phone continued buzzing with family updates. Sarah sent photos of herself getting a manicure captioned, "Want to look perfect when I meet Richard and Marcus again." My mother shared pictures of the fancy place settings she'd been practicing using YouTube tutorials to learn proper formal dining arrangements. My father posted a photo of himself reading business magazines preparing conversation topics that would impress their sophisticated guests. Each notification twisted the knife deeper. They were trying so desperately to appear worthy of respect from people who needed my help to survive. Sunday evening, I drove to my private investigator's downtown office for a final briefing on the Davidson family. Jake Morrison had been my intelligence resource for 3 years, helping me research potential clients and business partners. His information was always thorough, accurate, and revealing. "Richard Davidson is in deeper trouble than we initially thought," Jake reported, spreading financial documents across his desk. "He's borrowed against his house, liquidated his retirement accounts, and even taken out personal loans to keep Davidson Industries afloat. If this partnership with you doesn't work out, he's looking at complete financial ruin within 60 days. "What about his relationship with my family?" I asked. Jake consulted his notes. "Interesting dynamics there. According to my sources, Richard sees your sister's marriage to his son as somewhat beneath their social status. He's been making comments about needing to elevate the relationship by showing your family what real success looks like." The hypocrisy was staggering. Richard Davidson was planning to use Christmas dinner as an opportunity to demonstrate his superiority to my family while simultaneously begging for my help to save his failing empire. "There's more," Jake continued. "Richard has been telling business associates that he's secured a meeting with Sterling Solutions' CEO. He's using this potential partnership to maintain credibility with creditors and investors. Several people have heard him bragging about his connections to innovative young leaders in the tech industry. He's bragging about a meeting that could save his life, not knowing he's talking about the brother-in-law he's never met," I mused. "Gets better." Jake smiled grimly. "My contact at Davidson Industries says Richard specifically requested this meeting for Monday because he wants to use the partnership announcement to impress your family during Christmas dinner. He's planning to present himself as a high-level deal maker who networks with Seattle's most successful entrepreneurs." The irony was so perfect it almost seemed scripted. Richard Davidson intended to use his connection to me as a way to demonstrate his superiority to my family, the same family that had rejected me for being too unsuccessful to share their dinner table. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical December weather in Seattle. I dressed carefully for the occasion, selecting a charcoal gray suit that had been custom tailored on Savile Row during a business trip to London. The suit cost more than most people's monthly salary, and it showed in every detail: the perfect cut, the quality of the fabric, the precision of the stitching. I paired it with Italian leather shoes that had been handcrafted in Florence, a silk tie from a boutique in Paris, and a Swiss watch that could have served as a down payment on a house. This wasn't about showing off. It was about projecting the success that my family had never bothered to notice. At 9:30, Madison buzzed my office intercom. "Mr. Sterling, the Davidson party has arrived." There are three gentlemen, Mr. Richard Davidson, Mr. Marcus Davidson, and their attorney, Mr. Jeffrey Hoffman. Please escort them to conference room A, I replied. Offer them coffee, water, whatever they need. Tell them I'll join them at 10 o'clock exactly. I spent the next 30 minutes reviewing my strategy one final time. This meeting wasn't just about business, it was about justice. Not revenge exactly, but a reckoning. My family needed to understand the consequences of judging someone by appearances. Richard Davidson needed to learn humility. And I needed to finally step out of the shadows and claim the respect I'd earned. At exactly 10 o'clock, I walked down the hallway toward conference room A. Through the glass walls, I could see three men seated around the mahogany table, examining the awards and certificates displayed throughout the room. Richard Davidson was a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed, though I noticed his hands shaking slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. Marcus was younger, probably around 30, with Sarah's husband's nervous energy and eager-to-please demeanor. The attorney looked professionally skeptical, taking notes on everything he observed. I paused outside the conference room door, taking a deep breath. Once I walked through that entrance, everything would change. My family would never see me the same way again. Richard Davidson would realize that his salvation came from someone he dismissed as unworthy. The comfortable lies everyone had been living would crumble in a matter of minutes. My phone buzzed with one final family group text. My mother sharing a photo of the perfectly arranged dining room. Everything is ready for our special guests tonight. I can't wait for them to see how much effort we've put into making this Christmas dinner memorable. I smiled, slipping the phone back into my pocket. Christmas dinner was definitely going to be memorable, but not in the way my family expected. I opened the conference room door and stepped inside, ready to change everything. I pushed open the glass door to conference room A and stepped inside with quiet confidence. Three heads turned toward me simultaneously, and I watched their faces register different levels of recognition and confusion. Richard Davidson sat at the head of the table, his silver hair perfectly styled, and his expensive suit unable to hide the tension in his shoulders. He was older than I'd expected, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades building a business empire that was now crumbling around him. His eyes held the desperate look of a man running out of options. Marcus Davidson occupied the seat to his father's right, and I recognized him immediately from Sarah's wedding photos. He was younger than his father by about 30 years, with sandy brown hair and the soft features of someone who'd never faced real hardship. His navy blazer looked expensive but off the rack, suggesting the family's financial struggles were affecting even their wardrobe choices. The third man, Jeffrey Hoffman, was clearly their attorney. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and carried himself with the cautious air of someone who'd been brought along to prevent his clients from agreeing to anything disadvantageous. His briefcase sat open beside him, filled with legal documents and financial statements. "Gentlemen, good morning," I said, my voice carrying the calm authority I'd developed over years of high-stakes business negotiations. "I'm Lionel Sterling, Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Solutions." Richard Davidson's face went through a fascinating progression of emotions. First came polite business interest, the expression of a man meeting an important potential partner. Then confusion began creeping in around his eyes, as something about my appearance seemed familiar but out of place. Recognition dawned slowly, like watching someone solve a complicated puzzle. The color drained from his face as the impossible truth settled into his mind. Marcus Davidson experienced the same recognition process but faster. His mouth actually fell open as he stared at me in disbelief. I could see him mentally connecting the dots. His wife's unsuccessful brother, the CEO he'd come to beg for help. The Christmas dinner guest who'd been deemed too embarrassing to invite. "This?" Richard started, his voice barely a whisper. "This can't be right. There must be some mistake." "No mistake," I replied calmly, taking my seat at the opposite end of the table. "I understand you've been trying to reach me about a potential partnership between Davidson Industries and Sterling Solutions. Jeffrey Hoffman looked between his clients and me with professional concern. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, but there seems to be some confusion here. My clients appear to recognize you from a personal context. That's correct, I confirmed. Mr. Marcus Davidson is married to my sister Sarah. Mr. Richard Davidson is my brother-in-law, though we've never been formally introduced. Richard's hands began trembling visibly as the full implications hit him. You're Sarah's brother, the one who… His voice trailed off as he realized he couldn't finish that sentence without insulting me directly. The unsuccessful one. The one who wouldn't fit in with important business people. The one whose presence would embarrass the family. I supplied helpfully. Yes, that's me. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Lionel, I had no idea. Sarah never mentioned that you owned… That I was successful, I finished. That's because she doesn't know. None of my family knows what I've built here. Richard Davidson suddenly exploded. This is impossible, he shouted, his face turning red with a mixture of panic and humiliation. You drive an old Honda. You wear cheap clothes. You work odd jobs. Sarah told us you're barely making ends meet. Sarah told you what she believes to be true, I replied evenly. She's never asked about my actual career, just as you never bothered to research who owns Sterling Solutions before desperately calling my office for 3 months. The attorney cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should focus on the business matter at hand. Mr. Sterling, my clients are here to discuss a partnership that could benefit both companies. I leaned back in my chair and regarded Richard Davidson with careful attention. The man who'd spent 2 days bragging to my family about his upcoming meeting with Seattle's youngest business phenom was now confronting the reality that he'd been bragging about meeting the nephew he considered beneath his social status. Let's talk about Davidson Industries' current situation, I said, opening the financial folder Madison had prepared. Revenue down 67% over 18 months. Stock price declined 83%. 230 employees laid off. 3 major clients have terminated their contracts in the past 6 months. Richard's face went from red to pale gray. How do you know those numbers? I research every potential business partner thoroughly, I explained. Your company is 3 months away from bankruptcy. You've personally guaranteed most of the corporate debt, which means when Davidson Industries fails, you'll lose your house, your retirement savings, and your reputation. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Lionel, we came here hoping Sterling Solutions could help us modernize our systems, maybe find ways to improve efficiency. You came here because you're desperate, I corrected gently. Sterling Solutions represents your last hope to avoid complete financial destruction. My phone buzzed on the table with another family group text. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen and saw a message from Sarah. Getting so excited for tonight, Richard and Marcus are going to love Mom's cooking. I can't wait to hear about Richard's important business meeting today. Richard Davidson saw me reading the message, and his face crumpled with the weight of his situation. She has no idea, does she? Sarah doesn't know that her brother is… He couldn't finish the sentence. The successful businessman you've been trying to impress her with, I suggested. No, she doesn't know. She thinks you're meeting with some stranger who might save your company. She has no idea that the partnership you're begging for comes from the family member you helped exclude from Christmas dinner. Jeffrey Hoffman was scribbling notes frantically, clearly trying to understand the personal dynamics affecting this business negotiation. Mr. Sterling, regardless of the family relationships involved, are you interested in potentially partnering with Davidson Industries? I studied Richard Davidson's face carefully. The arrogance was gone, replaced by genuine fear and desperate hope. This was a man who'd spent his entire life looking down on others, finally facing the consequences of his prejudices. Before we discuss partnership terms, I said slowly, I think we need to address something important. Mr. Davidson, What exactly did you tell my family about me? Richard's voice was barely audible. We didn't discuss you specifically. But you did express opinions about my suitability for Christmas dinner, didn't you? You agreed that someone of my apparent social status wouldn't fit in with your sophisticated family gathering. Marcus jumped in defensively. Lionel, you have to understand, we only knew what Sarah told us about your situation. She said you were struggling financially, working occasional jobs, having trouble finding steady employment. And based on that information, you concluded I wasn't worthy of sharing a meal with your family. It wasn't like that. Marcus protested, though his tone suggested it was exactly like that. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I have something interesting to share with you. I opened my voice recording app, which had been running since I entered the conference room. Richard and Marcus had no idea their entire conversation was being documented. I also have detailed financial records showing exactly how dire Davidson Industries' situation really is. I continued, records that would be very interesting to your creditors, your remaining employees, and certainly to my family, who are spending thousands of dollars to impress you with their Christmas dinner tonight. Richard Davidson's face went completely white. What are you saying? I'm saying that the balance of power in this room isn't what you expected when you arrived this morning. The conference room fell silent except for the sound of Seattle rain against the windows and Jeffrey Hoffman's pen scratching across his legal pad. Richard Davidson stared at me with the expression of a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. Marcus finally spoke, his voice small and defeated. What do you want from us, Lionel? I smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. I want to save your company and your family's financial future. But first, I want everyone to understand exactly who they're dealing with. I reached across the table and pressed the intercom button. Madison, please come in here with the complete Sterling Solutions portfolio. As we waited for my assistant, I watched three grown men contemplate the impossible situation they'd stumbled into. The man they'd dismissed as unsuccessful held their entire future in his hands. And Christmas dinner was still 8 hours away. Madison entered the conference room carrying a leather portfolio that contained Sterling Solutions' complete corporate history. She placed it on the table with professional efficiency, her expression revealing nothing about the tension that filled the room like thick fog. Thank you, Madison, I said. Please also bring in the Davidson Industries analysis we prepared. Right away, Mr. Sterling. As my assistant left to retrieve the additional documents, I opened the portfolio to reveal Sterling Solutions' most impressive achievements. Financial statements showing $12 million in annual revenue. Client testimonials from Fortune 500 companies. Industry awards recognizing our innovative approaches to business challenges. Richard Davidson stared at the documents with the expression of a man confronting evidence of his own terrible judgment. His hands shook as he reached for the financial statement, studying numbers that represented everything his failing company desperately needed. $12 million annually, he whispered. In 5 years, you built a $12 million company. While living in my childhood bedroom for the first 6 months, I added. While your future daughter-in-law described me to wedding guests as the family member who couldn't get his life together. Marcus winced at the memory. Lionel, Sarah never meant to hurt you. She just didn't understand what you were working on. She never asked, I replied simply. None of you ever asked what I was actually doing with my time. You saw the old car and the simple clothes and made assumptions about my worth as a person. Madison returned with a thick folder labeled Davidson Industries Financial Analysis. I opened it to reveal charts and graphs that painted a devastating picture of Richard's company's decline. Your biggest problem isn't just outdated technology, I explained, spreading the documents across the table. It's systematic mismanagement compounded by resistance to change. You've been running Davidson Industries the same way your father did in 1975, ignoring every technological advancement of the past 20 years. Jeffrey Hoffman leaned forward to examine the analysis. This is remarkably thorough research, Mr. Sterling. How long did this analysis take to prepare? About 6 hours, I replied. We have automated systems that can evaluate any company's operational efficiency, financial stability, and market position. It's one of the services we provide to potential acquisition targets. Richard's head snapped up. Acquisition targets? Sterling Solutions has acquired 7 struggling companies over the past 3 years, I explained calmly. We typically purchase them for pennies on the dollar, implement our technological solutions, and either resell them at significant profit or integrate them into our operations. The color drained from Richard's face as he realized the implications. You could buy Davidson Industries outright. For approximately $2.3 million based on current market valuation, I confirmed. That's less than Sterling Solutions spends on employee bonuses each year. My phone buzzed with another family group text. This time it was my father sharing a photo of the wine he'd selected for dinner. Broke into my special collection for tonight. This 1998 Bordeaux cost more than some people make in a week, but our guests deserve the finest. I showed the screen to Richard and Marcus. My father is spending $200 on wine to impress you. Meanwhile, you're about to lose your house because your company is failing. Marcus buried his face in his hands. This is humiliating. It gets worse. I continued opening another section of the Davidson Industries analysis. Your company owes Sterling Solutions clients approximately $1.7 million for incomplete contracts and delayed deliveries. We could file legal claims tomorrow that would accelerate your bankruptcy timeline from 3 months to 3 weeks. Jeffrey Hoffman's pen stopped moving across his notepad. Are you threatening my clients, Mr. Sterling? I'm explaining the reality of their situation, I replied. Davidson Industries is drowning, and Sterling Solutions controls multiple potential lifelines. The question is whether we use those lifelines to save them or to acquire their assets at bankruptcy prices. Richard Davidson looked older than his 62 years as the weight of his predicament settled fully onto his shoulders. What do you want from us? I want honesty, I said simply. Starting with the truth about how my family has been treating me and how you've been talking about me, Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Lionel, you have to understand we didn't know. I want to hear it from your father. I interrupted, looking directly at Richard. Tell me exactly what you think of Sarah's family. Tell me what you've said about me specifically. Richard Davidson sat silent for several long moments, his internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I told Marcus that his marriage was beneath our family's social status. I said your family seemed nice enough, but not the kind of people we'd normally associate with. And about me specifically. I said you appeared to be a failure who couldn't get his life together. I worried that Sarah's family problems might reflect poorly on Marcus's career prospects. The words hung in the air like acid smoke. Jeffrey Hoffman looked deeply uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking, while Marcus studied his hands in obvious shame. You worried that my family's problems might hurt Marcus's career, I repeated slowly. The irony is remarkable considering that Marcus's career depends entirely on whether I decide to save your company. My phone rang and Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I answered it, putting the call on speaker without warning the men in the room. Hi, Lionel. My sister's voice filled the conference room. I wanted to call and make sure you're okay about Christmas. I know it probably stings to be excluded, but I really think it's for the best. Richard and Marcus sat frozen, realizing they were about to overhear a family conversation that would reveal exactly how they'd been discussing me. I understand completely, I replied, watching Richard's face as he heard his influence on my family's decision. Richard was telling us about his big business meeting today? Sarah continued, oblivious to the fact that Richard was sitting 3 feet from my phone. He's meeting with some successful tech company CEO who might save Davidson Industries. Isn't that exciting? Very exciting, I agreed. Richard says this CEO is supposed to be some kind of genius businessman, really young and innovative. He's hoping to use this partnership to expand Davidson Industries into new markets. Marcus thinks it could set their family up for generations. Marcus looked like he wanted to crawl under the table as he listened to his wife unknowingly describe him overhearing his father-in-law's desperation. That sounds like it could change everything for them, I said. It really could. And that's why tonight's dinner is so important. Richard and Marcus need to focus on their business success without worrying about. Sarah paused, searching for diplomatic language. Without dealing with family dynamics that might distract from their important work. Family dynamics like having an unsuccessful brother at the dinner table. Oh, Lionel, you know I don't think of you that way. It's just that Richard and Marcus move in very sophisticated circles. They're used to talking about corporate strategies and market investments. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable around all that business talk. Richard Davidson was staring at the phone with horror as he listened to my sister explain how they'd excluded me to protect his comfort level. I appreciate your concern, I said. I should probably let you go so you can finish preparing for your important guests. Thanks for understanding, Lionel. I love you and will definitely include you next year when things are less complicated. After Sarah hung up, the conference room remained silent for nearly a minute. Richard Davidson looked like a man confronting the full scope of his own prejudice and poor judgment. She has no idea, Marcus finally whispered. Sarah doesn't know that the CEO her father's been bragging about meeting is her own brother. The brother you helped exclude from Christmas dinner, I added. Jeffrey Hoffman cleared his throat professionally. Mr. Sterling, I believe my clients are beginning to understand their situation. Perhaps we could discuss potential partnership terms? I leaned back in my chair, studying Richard Davidson's defeated expression. The arrogant businessman who'd arrived this morning had been replaced by a humbled man facing the consequences of his assumptions and prejudices. We'll discuss partnership terms, I said finally. But first, I think Christmas dinner tonight is going to be much more interesting than my family expects. Richard looked up sharply. What do you mean? I smiled, reaching for my briefcase. I mean that I've changed my mind about spending Christmas alone. The afternoon rain had stopped by the time I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve. The house looked like something from a holiday magazine spread. Twinkling lights outlined every roofline, wreaths adorned each window, and warm golden light spilled from the dining room where my family had spent the day preparing their perfect Christmas dinner. I sat in my Tesla Model S for a moment, watching the bustling activity through the front windows. My mother moved between the kitchen and dining room, making final adjustments to place settings and flower arrangements. My father stood near the wine cabinet polishing glasses with meticulous care. Sarah paced nervously, checking her appearance in the hallway mirror every few minutes. They had no idea that their carefully orchestrated evening was about to become something entirely different. I had spent the afternoon making arrangements that would transform this Christmas dinner from a simple family gathering into the most important business meeting of Richard Davidson's life. The partnership contract sat in my briefcase. 47 pages of legal documentation that would save Davidson Industries from bankruptcy while establishing Sterling Solutions as their primary technology partner. But more importantly, the contract contained specific clauses that Richard would be required to acknowledge publicly. Clauses that would force him to admit his company's failures, recognize Sterling Solutions' role in saving his business, and acknowledge that he had misjudged the Sterling family's worth. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. All arrangements confirmed. Legal team standing by. Media contacts prepared for partnership announcement. Everything ready for your signal. I'd learned long ago that the most effective business negotiations happened when you controlled the environment completely. Tonight, I would control everything. I stepped out of the Tesla, noting how the luxury sedan looked dramatically out of place next to my family's modest vehicles. None of them knew I owned this car. They'd only seen me drive the old Honda Civic I kept specifically for family visits. Before I could reach the front door, it swung open to reveal my father's surprised face. Lionel, what are you doing here? I thought we explained about tonight. Change of plans, Dad, I said calmly, walking past him into the house. I think you'll find Christmas dinner much more interesting with me here. My mother appeared from the kitchen wearing her best dress, an expression of confused panic. Lionel, honey, we weren't expecting you. The table is set for 6 people, and the Davidsons will be here any minute. The Davidsons are already here, I replied, hearing car doors slam in the driveway. Sarah rushed into the hallway, her face flushed with stress and excitement. Lionel, you can't be here right now. Richard and Marcus are about to arrive, and everything needs to be perfect for them. Please, can't you just go home and we'll celebrate together tomorrow? I wouldn't miss this dinner for anything in the world, I said, settling into the living room just as the doorbell rang. My father opened the door to reveal Richard Davidson Marcus and a woman I recognized as Marcus's mother, Patricia Davidson. They entered with the confident air of people accustomed to being welcomed warmly wherever they went. Richard wore an expensive charcoal suit that couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders from our morning meeting. Marcus looked pale and nervous, clearly dreading the collision of his family worlds that was about to occur. Patricia Davidson appeared elegant and refined, with silver hair styled perfectly and jewelry that spoke of old money and established taste. "Welcome to our home," my father said warmly, taking their coats. "We're so honored to have you join us for Christmas dinner." Sarah stepped forward with bright enthusiasm. "Richard, Marcus, Patricia, thank you so much for coming. We've been looking forward to this all week." Richard's eyes found mine across the room, and I watched his face drain of color as the reality of the situation hit him. He'd spent the morning begging for my help to save his company, and now he was supposed to pretend I didn't exist while enjoying dinner with my family. "I'd like you to meet my brother Lionel," Sarah said, following her father-in-law's gaze. "I know we mentioned he wouldn't be joining us, but he surprised us by stopping by." Patricia Davidson smiled politely and extended her hand. "How lovely to meet you, Lionel. Richard and Marcus have told me so much about Sarah's family." I shook her hand warmly. "I'm sure they have. And I've heard quite a bit about your family as well, particularly about your business challenges." Marcus stepped closer quickly. "Lionel, maybe we could talk privately for a moment." "No need," I replied cheerfully. "I think tonight is perfect for bringing everything into the open." My mother appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers. "Please, everyone, make yourselves comfortable. Dinner will be ready in just a few minutes." As the group settled into the living room, I noticed my father bringing out the expensive wine he'd selected for the occasion. Richard Davidson sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, clearly struggling with how to handle this unexpected development. "So, Richard," my father said, pouring wine into crystal glasses, "Marcus mentioned you had an important business meeting today. How did that go?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Richard's hands began trembling as he realized he would have to discuss the meeting, where he'd begged for help from the son his hosts had excluded from dinner. "It was illuminating," Richard managed to say. "Richard's been working on a partnership with a very successful technology company." Sarah explained to me, her voice bright with pride. "It could transform Davidson Industries completely." "Really?" I said with genuine interest. "Tell me about this technology company." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It's called Sterling Solutions. They specialize in modernizing business operations for struggling companies." "Struggling companies?" my mother asked with concern. "Is Davidson Industries struggling?" The question created a moment of electric silence. Richard Davidson found himself caught between his pride and his desperate need for the partnership that could save everything he'd worked for. "All businesses face challenges," he said carefully. "The key is finding the right partners to help navigate difficult periods." My phone buzzed and I glanced at the screen to see a message from my legal team. "Contracts prepared. Press release drafted. Partnership signing can proceed on your signal." I looked up to find Richard watching me with growing alarm as he recognized the implications of my phone activity during this family gathering. Actually, I said, standing up from my chair, I think tonight would be perfect for discussing business partnerships in detail. I walked to the front door and opened it, revealing three people in professional attire carrying briefcases and legal documents. My family stared in confusion as I invited them into the living room. Everyone, I announced, I'd like you to meet my legal team from Sterling Solutions. They're here to finalize the partnership agreement with Davidson Industries. The living room erupted in shocked voices as my family tried to process what they were hearing. My mother's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. My father stood frozen, his mouth open in disbelief. Sarah stared at me like I'd just announced I was an alien from another planet. Richard Davidson buried his face in his hands, finally understanding that his salvation and his humiliation would be occurring simultaneously in front of the family he'd convinced to exclude me from Christmas dinner. Lionel, Sarah whispered, "What's happening? What is Sterling Solutions?" I smiled at my sister, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and sadness as I prepared to reveal the truth that would change our family dynamics forever. Sterling Solutions is my company, Sarah. I'm the CEO that Richard has been desperately trying to meet with for 3 months. As the implications sank in, I watched my family's faces transform from confusion to shock to dawning comprehension. Christmas dinner was about to become something none of us would ever forget. The silence that followed my revelation stretched for what felt like an eternity. My family stood frozen in tableau, their faces displaying every stage of shock and disbelief. My mother gripped the back of the sofa for support, my father's expensive wine forgotten in his hand. Sarah's mouth moved soundlessly as she tried to process information that contradicted everything she thought she knew about her brother. Richard Davidson looked like a man watching his worst nightmare unfold in slow motion. The business partner he desperately needed was the family member he'd helped exclude from this very dinner. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that he found himself at the mercy of someone he dismissed as unsuccessful and unworthy. Patricia Davidson was the first to break the silence. "I'm sorry, I don't understand what's happening here. Lionel, did you say you own Sterling Solutions? I founded it 5 years ago." I confirmed, gesturing for my legal team to arrange their documents on my mother's coffee table. "We're currently generating $12 million in annual revenue and employ 37 people across 3 cities. My father sank into his recliner, the wine glass trembling in his hand. "12 million, Lionel. How is that possible? You drive an old Honda. You wear simple clothes. We thought you were barely getting by. I chose to let you think that," I replied gently. "I wanted to know if you'd love me regardless of my bank account. I wanted your acceptance to be unconditional, not based on my net worth." Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "You're the CEO Richard's been trying to meet with, the one he said could save Davidson Industries." "The same one," I confirmed. "Your father-in-law has been calling my office for 3 months, increasingly desperate for a partnership that could prevent his company's bankruptcy." Marcus stood up abruptly, his face flushed with shame and panic. "Lionel, you have to understand we didn't know. If we had known who you really were, you would have treated me differently," I finished. "But that's exactly the problem. My worth as a person shouldn't depend on my financial success. My value as a family member shouldn't be conditional on impressing strangers." Richard Davidson finally spoke, his voice heavy with defeat. "What do you want from us? What do you want me to say?" I walked to where my briefcase sat beside the front door, retrieving the partnership contract that would save his company and restore his family's financial security. "I want honesty, complete honesty in front of everyone who's here tonight." My legal team had arranged their documents across the coffee table, transforming my parents' living room into an impromptu boardroom. The Christmas decorations and holiday dinner preparations created a surreal backdrop for what was becoming one of the most important business negotiations in Davidson Industries history. Richard, I said, holding the contract, tell my family exactly what you think of them. Tell them what you've said about me specifically. Tell them why you agreed that I shouldn't be invited to Christmas dinner. Richard's shoulders sagged as he confronted the full weight of his prejudice and poor judgment. I told Marcus that marrying into your family was beneath our social status. I said you seemed like nice people, but not the kind of family we'd normally associate with. My mother gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. My father's face darkened with anger as he understood how they'd been perceived by the people they'd worked so hard to impress. And about me personally, I prompted. I said you were a failure who couldn't get his life together. I worried that your family's problems might reflect poorly on Marcus's career and reputation. The words hit my parents like physical blows. My mother began crying quietly while my father stood up with barely controlled fury. You thought our family wasn't good enough for your son, my father demanded. You convinced us to exclude our own child from Christmas dinner because you were embarrassed to be associated with us. Sarah looked between her husband and her family with dawning horror. Marcus, is this true? Did you agree with your father about excluding Lionel? Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. Sarah, we only knew what you told us about Lionel's situation. We thought he was struggling financially, and we worried about awkward conversations during dinner. So you decided he wasn't worthy of sharing a meal with your family, my mother said through her tears. I stepped forward, still holding the contract. Here's what's going to happen. Davidson Industries needs this partnership to survive. Without Sterling Solutions' help, Richard will lose his company, his house, and his reputation within 60 days. I placed the contract on the coffee table where everyone could see it. This partnership will save your company and restore your family's financial security. But it comes with conditions that must be acknowledged publicly. Richard stared at the document like it was both salvation and damnation. What conditions? First, you'll publicly acknowledge that Davidson Industries was failing due to poor management and resistance to modernization. Second, you'll admit that Sterling Solutions saved your company from bankruptcy. Third, you'll recognize that you misjudged the Sterling family's worth and treated us with undeserved condescension. Jeffrey Hoffman had arrived with my legal team and was reviewing the contract terms. Mr. Sterling, these acknowledgments would be part of the public announcement of the partnership. Correct. The partnership announcement will include Richard's complete statement about his company's failures and his gratitude for Sterling Solutions' intervention. Patricia Davidson looked confused and hurt as she began understanding the family dynamics that had led to this moment. Richard, did you really tell this family that they weren't good enough for us? Richard Davidson broke down completely years of arrogance and prejudice, crumbling under the weight of his desperate circumstances. I was wrong. I was completely, totally wrong. I judged you based on appearances and assumptions. I convinced myself that success meant looking down on others instead of lifting them up. He turned to my parents with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry. You opened your home to my family, spent your own money to make us feel welcome, and I repaid that kindness by treating your son as unworthy of our company. My father's anger began giving way to confusion and hurt. Why would you exclude Lionel when you needed his help so desperately? Because I'm a fool, Richard admitted. I was so busy judging appearances that I never bothered to learn who I was really dealing with. I dismissed someone who could buy and sell my entire company without affecting his cash flow. Sarah sat down heavily, her perfect Christmas dinner forgotten, as she processed the full scope of what had happened. Lionel, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what you'd accomplished. I never asked about your real work because you assumed I was failing because that's what you wanted to believe, I said gently. It was easier to see me as someone who needed help rather than someone who'd succeeded beyond anything our family had ever imagined. My mother wiped her eyes and looked at me with wonder. $12 million a year. You built a company that's successful while we thought you were struggling. I built it partly because you thought I was struggling. I admitted. I wanted to prove that worth isn't determined by appearances or social status. I wanted to show that success comes from perseverance, innovation, and treating people with respect regardless of their circumstances. I picked up the contract and handed it to Richard Davidson. This partnership will save your company and provide financial security for your family for generations. It will also serve as a reminder that judging people by appearances leads to catastrophic mistakes. Richard signed the contract with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, as he realized that his salvation had come from the family member he'd convinced his in-laws to reject. As my legal team finalized the partnership documentation, my mother began setting an additional place at the dinner table. Lionel, will you stay for Christmas dinner? Will you forgive us for not believing in you when we should have? I looked around the room at my family at the Davidsons, who'd learned a harsh lesson about prejudice and assumption, at the Christmas decorations that had witnessed an impossible transformation of relationships and understanding. I'll stay, I said simply. But this time, we're celebrating as equals who respect each other regardless of our bank accounts or social status. The Christmas dinner that followed was unlike anything my family had ever experienced. Richard Davidson, humbled and grateful, spoke about the importance of never judging people by their circumstances. Patricia Davidson apologized repeatedly for her family's treatment of mine. Marcus promised to rebuild his relationship with his wife's family based on genuine respect rather than condescension. My parents spent the evening asking about Sterling Solutions, marveling at the business I'd built while they'd worried about my future. Sarah cried as she realized how badly she'd misjudged her brother's capabilities and worth. As the evening wound down, Richard Davidson stood to make a final statement. I want everyone here to know that tonight changed me fundamentally as a person. I learned that true success isn't about looking down on others. It's about lifting people up, even when they've wronged you. He turned to me directly. Lionel, you had every right to let my company fail as punishment for how we treated you. Instead, you chose to save us while teaching us a lesson about respect and family values. That's the kind of person I want to become. The partnership announcement made headlines in the Seattle business community the following week. Richard Davidson's public acknowledgement of his company's failures and gratitude for Sterling Solutions intervention became a case study in corporate humility and family reconciliation. More importantly, Christmas dinner became a celebration of understanding forgiveness and the recognition that true worth comes from character rather than circumstances. As I drove home that night in my Tesla, passing the old Honda Civic I'd used to maintain my deception, I reflected on the lesson this experience had taught all of us. Family love should never be conditional on success. Business partnerships work best when built on mutual respect rather than desperation. And sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating your opponents, but from helping them become better people. The text from my father arrived as I pulled into my penthouse parking garage. Son, we're proud of who you are, not what you've accomplished. Thank you for teaching us the difference. That message meant more than any business contract I'd ever signed. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been underestimated by people who should have believed in you? Have you found that family support sometimes depends too much on external success rather than unconditional love? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like, subscribe for more stories about family forgiveness and finding your true worth, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their value doesn't depend on other people's approval. Thank you for joining me for this Christmas story, and I hope your holidays are filled with the kind of love and acceptance that doesn't depend on your bank account or social status.